What is going on, everyone? Welcome to Therapy on Two Wheels. Today we're going to be talking about how to pass the MSF course. Let's jump in. So for a little background information, I did start riding a little over 3 years ago. I think it was September of 2021. And during that time, I had started looking at what I needed to do to get my license, to be able to get my first bike, start riding on the road. I had been riding off-road for a little bit beforehand, just an electric bike or electric motorcycle. Went up to about 50 miles per hour. Familiar with the Sur-On? That was kind of my foray of getting into motorcycles. Kind of sparked that interest for me. Now with the MSF course, there are different courses that you can take. You can even go to the DMV and just take the rider's or driver's test on your motorcycle if you already have one, or you can borrow a friend's or family members if your family rides too. There's a lot of different ways that you can get a motorcycle license, and it does depend on each state. Is a little bit different on what their regulations are, what their laws are, and what you need to go through to get a motorcycle license or motorcycle endorsement on your license if you're already a driver. And with today, I'm going to be talking about some of the tips on how to make it easier to pass the MSF course, as somebody that has gone through it myself. This was over 3 years ago, but I still retained a lot of that information, still remember it quite well, compared to somebody that might have done it 20 years ago. It's still pretty fresh in my mind. And with all these tips, I have 10 tips for you, and then I got a little bonus one at the end as well. But the first tip that I want to talk about is paying attention in class. So when you go to the MSF course, depending on where you're at, this can be the first area I was trying to get in MSF course was actually it was in Las Vegas at the college. And the course is, I think, about 120, 130 bucks. It's a weekend course for Saturday and Sunday. And I showed up on Saturday along with about 15 other people, and the instructor didn't show up. So we waited around for about an hour. Nobody came. Called a bunch of different numbers. Nothing happened. Got an email a couple days later. They didn't know what happened. They refunded us money. But I had waited 3 months. I booked that course 3 months ahead of time because it was booked pretty far out. They had a really long wait list for it. There's a lot of people that ride motorcycles in Las Vegas. Very commonplace for it. And so since I wasn't able to get into that course, I ended up looking around, and I saw that Harley Davidson also does an MSF course. Unfortunately, it's much more expensive. It's about $500 for that course, but I didn't want to wait another 3 months to get my endorsement. So I spent the money. I think it was about 2 weeks later I got into that class. And with this class, there's going to be two portions. So there's an in-class portion, very similar to being in school. And then there's what they call a range portion, which is when you're outside actually on the motorcycles riding around. And when you're in the class, depending on how you were in school, whether that's elementary, middle school, high school, college, whatever it is, it's a very similar feeling to that. So if you were not a very good student, you had a hard time paying attention in class, just be aware that you're going to be sitting there for hours at a time, going through various materials, whether it's in a book, they're going to show videos, they'll go through PowerPoints, they're going to talk for a while as well. This is kind of the more boring portion of the course because you're not actually riding a motorcycle, but it really is essential for you to understand the basics of how motorcycles work, understanding the different laws of riding the motorcycle, especially in your state. Right now I'm here in California. I'm going up to Idlewild into the mountains, so it'll be a nice little mountain ride. But depending on your state, it'll be a little bit different on what they're going to be teaching you. But you really do want to pay attention because it's going to give you all the information that you need to know to be a successful and safe rider when you're on the road. So even though it might seem boring, pay attention in that class. There is also a written test. Ours was pretty easy. They kind of went through the answers with us afterwards to make sure that we were all going to pass that portion. But then there's still the riding portion outside. But keep in mind, just depending on how strict your instructors are, if you don't pass that written test, you're not going to get your motorcycle endorsement. So make sure you're paying attention, do a little bit of studying. They're going to give you a whole booklet or pamphlet for you to take home. You could read it over. Just look it over, once the day before the test. and make sure that you're at least familiar with some of the basic concepts and regulations and rules, and you'll be completely fine. The second thing that I have as a tip for you is, once you get out onto the range, don't be afraid to drop the bike. I know I definitely was, especially at a Harley dealership. They were almost brand new. I think they're Street 500, so not the most powerful bikes, not the nicest bikes, but they're still $10,000 bikes. And I really did not want to drop it. I also didn't want to be that person to drop the bike in the class. We had about 10 people in my class. That ranged from, I think the youngest guy was 19, the oldest guy was about 60, and I really did not want to drop the bike, so that was a big fear for me going into it. But I'm telling you, don't be afraid to drop it. Usually they're going to have engine guards on them, so you're not going to destroy the bike. They're used to people dropping them, especially if you're in a class that's not at Harley Davidson. They probably have some really beat up bikes because they're used to people dropping them. It's a very common thing in those courses because people are not used to either handling the weight of a bike, they're not used to handling it in slow speed turns. It's just a very unfamiliar feeling compared to being in a car if you're a car driver. So don't be afraid to drop the bike. That's before the final testing. Final testing, that's a different story. That's going to be another tip here coming up. But before you get to that final test, do not be afraid to drop the bike if you need to. The third tip that I have for you is going to be, don't be afraid to ask for help, especially on that range. If you have trouble with anything, ask for help from the instructors. That's why they're there. Typically, at least for our class, there were 2 different instructors. Both of them had 20 plus years experience of motorcycling. Some of them did, I think one of them was a championship rider specifically for slow speed maneuvers on a Honda Goldwing. And they're very experienced, they're very knowledgeable. They're usually pretty nice as well. You know, I know motorcyclists sometimes get a bad rap for being mean, but both of my instructors were super nice. So don't be afraid to ask for help if something you think is wrong with the motorcycle because you're just not familiar with it. If you have issues even with your gear, with your helmet, you know, there was people in my class that didn't even know how to put their helmet on. They had the double D ring and they literally could not put their helmet on, so they just bought it, brought it to the class, hadn't even put it on before. So if you have any issues, just ask for help. Don't feel like you're going to be the person that they're going to point at and laugh at and make fun of. Everybody, for the most part, usually everybody is new there. So it's unfamiliar territory for most of the people that you're going to be out there going through the class with. So do not be afraid to ask for help. The fourth tip that I have for you is to watch what your classmates are doing, especially out on the range, because you want to be familiar with what not to do. You're going to watch all of their mistakes. You can learn from others' mistakes that they're making and then go out and just don't do those same mistakes. So watch what others are doing, and you have to be open to failing as well. Don't worry about making mistakes. Everybody is going to make mistakes. Like I was saying, most people are new there. They've never been on a motorcycle. They may have never been on a dirt bike or a quad or you know, anything besides a car. It's very unfamiliar for most of the people out there, especially ones that are not used to using a clutch, shifter. You know, if you've never driven a stick shift car, all of this stuff is very unfamiliar for you. So watch what the other people are doing, learn from their mistakes, and just make better decisions yourself. The fifth tip I have for you is don't take unsolicited advice from other people that are not experienced riders. Listen to your instructors. They know what they're doing. They'll tell you all the right information. Do not listen to the guy that has never ridden a motorcycle before that's trying to give you advice on how to do things. They don't know what they're doing, and they're just going to mess you up. They're probably going to say something different than the instructors are, and it's not going to help you out at all. So just avoid taking that unsolicited advice from people that don't know what they're talking about. Tip number 6 is to listen to your instructors at all times while on the range. I had a group of about 10 people, and some of them were paying attention and some of them were not. There was actually a guy that was on his cell phone a couple of times while the instructors were talking. They had to tell him multiple times to put his cell phone down. He said he was taking a work call and it was important. That's not what you're there for. You're there to learn how to ride a motorcycle. You're not there to work. So do not expect to go into this class and be able to take work calls or do anything. You know, if you have an emergency, that's one thing. If you're taking a call from work, you're there to learn how to ride a motorcycle. So pay attention to what the instructors are telling you. Do not be doing anything else. Try not to daydream or kind of daze off. There is going to be a lot of talking, a lot of explanations, a lot of new information for you. So just know that you should be listening to those instructors at all times. The seventh thing that I'll say as a tip is to show up on time. Our instructors were pretty laid back, but they were very strict about the time of showing up. They actually dropped somebody from the class because they showed up 2 minutes late. I think the start time was 8 o'clock and they showed up at 8:02 outside the door, and they were knocking on it. They told them to go home. They said, if you can't show up on time, you're not responsible enough to ride a motorcycle. So they are very, very serious about showing up on time to these classes. If you have an emergency, whatever it is, take care of that emergency. Getting your motorcycle license is probably not as important. So make sure you take care of your business, your personal matters, and show up to class on time. Tip number 8 is just to not get down on yourself if you do make mistakes during the class, because you're going to. There's going to be things that you don't get right. You're not going to be 100% perfect every single time. So if you have that type A personality, you got to learn to drop that real quickly when you're learning how to ride a motorcycle. You are going to make mistakes. Everybody in the class is going to make mistakes. You're all probably going to make the same mistakes over and over again, but that's why you're there. You're there to practice, you're there to learn, and you're there to make yourself better and learn how to ride a motorcycle and make yourself safe. So don't get down, don't get bummed out, don't get sad if you you don't stop as fast as somebody else. And it's not a comparison. Don't compare yourself to the other people. Somebody else might be better than you at one of the exercises, and then you might be better at them at something else. You know, there's stopping exercises, there's U-turn exercises, there's left turns and right turns from a stop. There's all different kinds of things that you're going to be doing in that class. Do not compare yourself to others. You will be good at some things, you're going to be bad at others. But that's why you're there, is to practice, to learn, and to get better before you actually get out onto the road where all this stuff actually matters. Tip number 9 is just to ask lots of questions, especially if this is very new to you. The instructor's not going to get mad if you're asking too many questions. There's no such thing in a class like this. Everybody should be asking questions because everybody is generally new to motorcycling. So ask as many questions as you can, both in the in-class portion and when you get out onto the range. When you're out on that range, yes, it can sometimes be hard to hear. When I was out in the class, it was 110 degrees in September in Las Vegas, so it was very warm, and most of the time we had our visors open. If it's cold or something, you're in the Midwest or the North and you're trying to do this in the middle of January, and you have your visor down, just lift your visor up real quick, shout out to the instructors, they'll be able to hear you. None of those bikes are going to be so loud to where they have aftermarket exhaust and stuff like that to where you can't hear it. People going 20 miles per hour and crazy exhaust sounds. So don't be afraid to ask questions. There are no stupid questions in these classes. So if you have questions during that in-class portion, raise your hand, speak up, because somebody else probably has that same question as you and they're just maybe scared to ask. Same thing when you're out on the range. If you don't understand something, tell them. They would rather you be safe and not understand something and ask those questions than to go out and do something that's going to get yourself hurt. There was one of the guys that half the time was not paying attention in the class, clearly was not paying attention in the in-class portion or the range portion, especially when we were talking about braking. And they said over and over again before one of these exercises not to grab the front brake. Whatever you do, do not grab the front brake. You want to progressively brake if you're going too fast to scrub off your speed. But we go into, I think it was the second day, kind of in the early morning, we're going into one of the exercises where it's kind of higher speed. You speed up to about 20 miles per hour, and then you have to slow down real quick and make a sharper right-hand turn, and then a quick left-hand turn. So this guy got up to 20 miles per hour, just completely forgotten. Again, this is all new for your brain too, so you're still having to do a lot of thinking with all of this stuff. But with him, he grabbed his front brake. I heard tires screeching. I was facing the other way, but you hear tires screeching, and all of a sudden guy goes over his handlebars, and he wasn't wearing any gear. You're not needing to wear any gear besides a helmet, I think gloves, in the MSF course. You can just have a long sleeve and whatever kind of pants you wear that you want to wear. So this guy just had a long sleeve on and pants, and yeah, he tore up his shoulder. He got pretty messed up from it. Took him a while to get back up. He had to sit out for a couple exercises. I don't think he had any serious injuries, but yeah, it was all bloodied up on his shoulder just because he grabbed the front brake. And they said over and over again right before that exercise, do not grab the front brake, progressively brake if you have to, and you can also use your rear brake. They tell you time and time again, most of the time, unless you're doing the emergency braking exercise, you're going to be using your rear brake to slow yourself down. And that's something, especially as a newer rider, you got to get familiar with, because a lot of times, especially if you come from riding bicycles as a kid, you're going to be grabbing onto that front brake because that's what you're used to. You're going to be using your rear brake when you're going into those slow speed exercises. So just pay attention. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And then the 10th one, for a tip that I have for you, is don't be afraid to put your foot down when you're doing all these exercises. So especially when you're doing figure eights. Figure eights are probably the hardest thing for most people in that course. And as you're going through, instead of trying to go through it quickly or making super wide turns, push yourself a little bit to make those tighter turns. And don't be afraid to put your foot down. Putting your foot down is much better than dropping the bike. Dropping the bike sucks. You know, you can't do it. Don't be afraid to do it. But if you can, just put your foot down. It's okay to just tap your foot on the ground, especially at those low speeds. You'll just correct yourself back upright, and then you just keep moving. The only time where this makes a difference is in the final test. In that final test, everything that you do incorrectly is going to be marked off by points. Now, in our final test, and I'm pretty sure this is probably all MSF courses, if you drop the bike, it is an automatic failure. It's not you get a second chance or you get to come back the next day and try it again. If you drop that bike in that final test, you don't get your motorcycle endorsement. You're done. You have to come back again. You have to sign up for the test again. I think they give you like a discounted rate, like half price or something, just because you have to show up for, I think, the second day in that test. But it's much better to put your foot down. I think you get -1 point for each time that you put your foot down, and you're allowed to get 10 points marked off, and there's, I think it was 6 or 7 exercises or something like that. So if you have to, you can put your foot down on every single exercise and you will still pass. Same thing with putting your foot down. Don't be afraid to hit the cones. Hitting the cones is much better than dropping the bike, because again, dropping the bike, you're automatically failing the class. If you hit a cone, you get 1 point marked off. You can hit 10 cones or hit 5 cones and put your foot down 5 times, and you're still going to pass the class. But if you drop your bike, you're done. So that is the first 10 tips. I have a little bonus tip for you as well, and this is to watch YouTube videos ahead of time. Familiarize yourself with the kind of mechanics of a bike, of how you shift, you know, pulling in the clutch lever, shifting up, shifting down, rolling off the throttle at the same time. A lot of this is going to be very difficult for your brain because you're just not used to it. It's something that's going to take practice, and it takes time before you don't really have to think about what you're doing at the entire time that you're riding a bike. So watch some videos, just familiarize yourself with the basics of how to ride a motorcycle, and you're going to go into that class 10 times more knowledgeable than pretty much everybody else there, because most of the people in my class had never looked up any videos. They didn't know anything about motorcycling. One guy had already bought a motorcycle. He bought a I think it was a Yamaha TW200, and he failed the class. In our class of 10 people, 5 of them failed. It was a 50% failure rate. That's horrible. You would hope that it's going to be higher than that, but again, people aren't paying attention. They're not doing well in the exercises. There are some people that are just not meant to ride a motorcycle, and you'll probably know if it's you pretty quickly, because either it's going to feel really good, it's going to feel really fun, it kind of feels natural once you get on the bike. By that second day, you're excited. First day's a little nervous, second day you get excited, you're happy to get out there, going through these exercises. You see yourself progressively getting better and better. Some people just are not good at it at all, and they should not be on a bike because they're going to go out and kill themselves on the street. If you are not good in an MSF course going 20 to 25 miles per hour, you go out on the street and, like right here, I'm going 30 miles per hour. This is super slow in these twisty mountain roads. If you're going 50, 60 around these curves, I could run straight into that wall and I'm done. Like, I'm out. So you really have to be cognizant of, is motorcycling right for you? Is this a passion for you? Is this just something that you've always wanted to do? You want to make sure that this is something that is safe for you, and that's where that's why you're starting with that MSF course, is to build up that foundation of safety. That's literally the name of the course, Motorcycle Safety Foundation. And so go take that course, get better at motorcycling, and don't stop practicing after the course. Biggest piece of advice as well, afterwards, after you pass the course, you get your first bike, you go start riding, don't just continue riding. Go practice, go find an empty parking lot somewhere, you know, an empty road, whatever it is, and continue practicing that. Go do your U-turns, do your emergency braking, especially when you get a new bike and you're getting familiar with the ergonomics of it. Go do all of these things. Do not stop practicing and learning as soon as you pass your course, because you're not done. There's still a ton more that you're gonna have to learn. I'm still learning new things every day. So that is my top 10 tips for how to pass the MSF course, plus my little bonus tip. So if you want to see more of these videos, you have any questions, comments, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. I'll see you all in the next one.